Okay, welcome to week 8. Week 8 is ice hockey and racing, particularly NASCAR. And, I put these together for two different reasons. I'll fess up that the first reason in really a good one, which is that they sort of don't fit anywhere else. And, I need to get them both in. And this is sort of a week to kind of put things that don't kind of fit elsewhere. But there's another kind of fundamental similarity between the two of them, which is that I called them kind of national regional sports. The big team sports that we looked at, baseball, the big three team sports are more completely national. Okay. And golf and tennis kind of go together in another way. But these sports are national sports. They have national followings, but they really have core regional. Their core is distinctly regional. I don't think you can say that there's a regional core to basketball. Basketball is popular in the Midwest and much more popular there than everywhere else. That type of thing. But if you look at ice hockey and you look at the upper Midwest and the Northeast and Canada, it's a lot more popular there than it is in the Southeast or even the Southwest. There's Kings fans here. There's a Kings team here. There's a team in Atlanta. There's a Tampa Bay team. But, it's really kind of, you can trace the core within the national fan base. There's a real core, okay, that's more regional. And you could say the same thing for NASCAR as well, sort of the South and Appalachia, sort of Alabama down to, sort of Louisiana, or more Alabama down to Florida, then up through Mississippi, up to through the Carolinas to Virginia. That's like the core of NASCAR. So these are national sports that sort of do have a core that kind of asserts itself. You saw a little bit of a clip on Bobby Orr as in an overtime victory, celebrating the win of the Boston Bruins. And once again, it's an example of how photographs are so much cooler than the actual footage, because the actual footage, he's only like that for a brief second. And it just kind of looks like he's pitching forward and almost falling and jumping at the same time, whereas the photograph makes it look like he's, Superman. Ice hockey, again, you're seeing a very common theme from last week with the racket net game, evolving out of and with the ball stick game evolving into golf, tennis and golf. Ice hockey evolved from ball stick ice games that were played not only throughout Northern Europe, specifically in Northern Scandinavia, like there was one form in Norway, which is very close to what we play today, but also in Scotland, but also among the indigenous tribes of northern parts of North America. They had ball stick games. They had, most famously lacrosse, but they also had ones where they pushed around balls, not on the ground, but on ice. Okay. A little bit different, but, basically there's different sort of ball stick ice games that kind of slowly but surely in North America begin coalescing into what we would today call ice hockey. Professional hockey in North America extends back into the 19th century to, among other places, McGill University, as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, partially responsible for 3 of the 4 major team professional North American sports. The National Hockey League, which eventually forms out of kind of these different, more regional leagues, enjoys some of the longest and richest traditions in professional sports. Among others, they're the ones that it was in the NHL where they came up with the concept of a broom. Okay. To show that we're going to defeat you without you winning a single game. We're about to sweep you. And it still happens. I mean, when somebody's about to sweep somebody in basketball, it's not like, somebody might just somebody that's really clever might bring a broom and show it and, that type of thing. But, you're talking about like in the 1930s, people would be bringing and still in some hockey leagues, you look around when they're about to sweep and you'll see like there's like 40 people holding brooms and like 50 people holding brooms. It also had an influence, I think, although I've never been able to find any evidence of this, in World War World War II, coming back into Pearl Harbor, a submarine. I can't remember exactly what the because I never talked about this in World War II, and it's been years since I've read about this in my World War II class. But it had something to do with if you sunk a certain number of ships, if you were a submarine, and you avoided any sort of damage from depth charges or whatever, it was called having a clean sweep. Okay, and what they would do to signal as they're coming back into Pearl Harbor, to resupply, is if the people saw that were on shore, a broom attached to the top of the submarine, because the submarine would be coming in above water, they would know that this crew is at least saying that they had a clean sweep, where they sunk a certain number of ships. I think it was like one ship for every week you were. I can't remember what the criteria was. I think that might have come from the NHL, because the whole clean sweep thing. Never take a hat to a professional hockey game if you're really in love with the hat, because if one of the players scores three goals, they have what's called a hat trick, and you're supposed to take your hat off and throw it into the arena, and then someone will come along and sweep up all the hats, and they'll give it to the guy. Okay, and who knows? They'll probably give most of them away, and choose one to place in his trophy case. But you can find footage of this. Someone gets a hat trick, and people immediately start ripping off their hats and throwing them in. And then the Detroit Red Wings, one of my least favorite teams, they're so bad they make me sneeze. Now, the reason I don't like them so much is, number one, they were so good for so long. So you start it's like the Yankees. I mean, come on, please, Yankees, can you let someone else win the World Series? Like in the 1950s and 60s. Same thing with the Detroit Red Wings. But then their coach was also not a very pleasant human being. He would routinely scream at other players, and would wait afterwards and follow them as they're walking to their cars after a match and continue screaming at them. But when he took it to another level is when he'd do that to their families. I mean, he didn't do this that often, but he had a huge temper and just didn't know when to kind of let go. His name, he was a really good coach, though. Scotty, I can't think of his name. You can Google it. But Detroit, I mean, they have this weird tradition called the Legend of the Octopus. And on the first game of the year, the first home game of the year, someone, and often, you want to make sure someone's going to do it. So you need to go get an octopus and you heave it onto the ice. Now, these are dead octopus, and then people have to go around sweeping up the octopi, the 15 octopi that have been thrown onto the ice. I've always wondered, how do you get into the game? They do it, they search you, and where were you hiding that octopus? But it's just kind of this odd tradition. And then the championship trophy itself is so cool. I really don't like hockey that much. I don't watch it that much. I sometimes will watch the NHL come Stanley Cup time. Often I'll forget, or often I'll just watch if it's an elimination game, I'll start watching. I mean, that's how little I pay attention to hockey. But I got to admit, hockey is one of the best sports at kind of creating these myths and having these really cool traditions. And Lord Stanley's Cup, which I think you saw in one of the videos, started out as this bowl. But the reason it's now this huge thing that they have to hoist over their head, and it's really heavy, is because everyone who wins the championship gets their name engraved onto it. So they have to keep adding layers. And eventually, I don't know what they're going to do. Eventually they may have to kind of start over. Okay, that was Stanley Cup 1.0. Now we're going to start on Stanley Cup 2, But, there's this sort of tradition of if you win the Stanley Cup, you get your name on it. And then there's a tradition that if you win, they hand it, no one puts it above their head until they hand it to they kind of have it down here and they give it to the captain, and the captain then hoists it above their head and they skate around the rink holding it. And then he puts it down, gives it to the next guy, and everyone on the team gets to do a lap. And there have been some kind of really poignant moments. I remember the guy's name was Ray Bork. And the reason I liked him and knew about him was because the only teams I've ever really followed is the Kings and the Boston Bruins. Those are the two teams that, if I have any rooting interest at all, it will be for them. And he was, he played in 4 decades. He played in the late 1970s, the 80s, the 90s, and like the early 2000s. And you can have a long career in hockey. Hockey's one where you can be playing in your 40s, and he was. And, so I'd known about this guy for a long, long time. And, he just never, that was when the Boston Bruins weren't very good. And so finally he gets traded. Like his last year, he's like, okay, I'm going to chase a Stanley Cup. And I think he went to the Colorado Avalanche. Was it there? I think. And they won. And so the captain took it and didn't put it over his head and gave it to Ray Bourque, who then got the first lap. And so there's been times like that where they did the same thing. The Edmonton Oilers won 4 championships in 5 years in the early 80s. And the only reason they didn't win the 5th one, which I think would have been their 4th, is that they had a rookie who was really good, and he accidentally scored a goal on his own goal, which is hard to do in hockey. And they ended up losing, and otherwise they would have won 5 in a row. And so they, they allowed him to go around first, sort of as a, hey, look, you're part of why we got to the finals. Yes, you're the reason we lost it, but we wouldn't have gotten here without you. And you're the reason we're here. One of the reasons you're here this year as well. We're going to let you redeem yourself. And then, there's this tradition that I don't know how far back it goes, but it doesn't go nearly back as far as these other two, which is the trophy travels in the off season. There's a guy that travels with it, and he actually buys a plane ticket for a seat on the plane for the Stanley Cup so that it's never packed away in baggage. He's always next to it, because it's gone missing a few times. And he has these special gloves he uses, and I don't know why they use these special gloves, because then everyone gets it. All the winning members of the team, including people like coaches and strength trainers, and not just the players, they each get 24 hours with it to do whatever they want. There's people that drink out of it. There's people that put their children in it. It's been defecated in by babies. It's been peed in by small children. They sometimes put out alcohol for it and cigars, they almost treat it like it's a human. Okay. Different people do different things. A lot of people will have a parade and take it through the streets of a lot of these guys are from small towns in Canada, and it's a real festive occasion where everyone can get together, and they know well in advance, and it almost becomes like a town celebration. But some people have done very strange things with the cup, with the Stanley Cup. So, just that all kind of leads to this real interesting aspect to, presenting the World Series trophy, first of all, looks it's a weird trophy with all these little flags. It looks kind of stupid. The Larry O'Brien trophy and, the golden football or the silver football is kind of cool in football, but it's not nearly as cool as, the Stanley Cup. Ice hockey is the dominant team sport in Canada and Russia, as well as in many countries throughout Northern Europe and Eastern Europe. Sweden, Czechoslovakia have historically been powerhouses. Since the 1980 Winter Olympics, and in particular the dissolution or the fall of the Soviet Union, and the splitting it up into a lot of different countries, most notably Russia, the final game of the male ice hockey tournament at the Olympics is routinely one of the most anticipated events in international sports and the headline event of the Winter Olympics. I think you can add to that women's hockey in recent times, because Canada and the United States have both become quite good, and Canada was a little bit dominant there for a while. And in the last Olympics, the Americans beat the Canadians in an exciting fashion. I was watching that on TV when it happened, and just thought it was amazing, amazing ending, amazing outcome. But I think we're going to talk about the Miracle on Ice when we talk about Olympics in a couple of weeks, so I won't talk about it much here. But that game, the 1980 Winter Olympics, when the Soviet Union was defeated, and the United States actually won, really did sort of open it up to be sort of a more international, not just Russian, Canadian, American sport, but other areas as well. The game appeals to the working classes and walks a fine line between encouraging and punishing violence. I showed you some fights. I had a hard time finding, and I don't remember if any of the. There's examples you can find where, you know what they usually do after they beat each other to a pulp? They say good job, and like almost like hug each other and then go off to serve time in the penalty box. There's this weird thing that the fighting has to be sort of followed by uh, a little bit of camaraderie. Doesn't always happen, but it often does. Canadians are good at that. I mean, there's a tradition in curling, if you've ever seen curling, that you're supposed to drink beer with the opposing team after. I don't know if it's done anymore. I don't know if it's done historically. I'm sure you don't have to drink beer if you don't want to. You can drink, Coke or Mountain Dew or whatever, water. But curling was sort of had this rule that was kind of an unwritten rule, but that you had to socialize with the opponents after you beat them, or after you lost to them. That this was sort of something that was considered part of the sport. And I think that thing in hockey about you fight each other, then it doesn't matter who won or lost the fight. You're punching each other in the face, and then as soon as it's broken up, good job, and then they go back. It's really crazy. It does appeal to working classes, but it also appeals to upper middle class as well. There's pageantry and beauty to it. There's kind of violence and power to it. There's strategy to it. It really has a lot of. I've seen a couple games live, and let me tell you, there's no further discrepancy between watching something live and watching something on TV than hockey. Hockey is so much better in person. First of all, they move so much more quickly than you realize. Same thing with soccer. We're so far, the camera is so far away from the action. We don't realize how fast they're running back and forth. Really same thing with football too, although often we get, more tight end cameras, field cameras and stuff like that. Hockey is very fast paced. Okay. And they're skating faster backwards than I can run going forwards or ever have been able to run, when I was younger and fleeter of foot. And then when they check each other in the boards, I mean, I remember this was a college game in Colgate, New York. I mean, you're talking about power, boom, that type of thing. It's really impressive game live. I think if I saw it more live, I'd probably be a bigger fan. But on TV, it loses a lot of that type of thing. You also can't see the puck even on TV. Sometimes it's, I mean, this thing's whizzing by at 100 miles an hour. Due to its speed, elegance, and violence, the game is known to be one of the best. Oh, I already kind of talked about that. It just doesn't translate as well to television. That's Maurice the Rocket Richard, the first real superstar, and kind of the Michael Jordan or the Tom Brady. I can't remember how many. Did they win 8 titles, or he may have won 9 or something crazy. He's I think second only to Bill Russell and a few other Celtics when it comes to how many championships have you won. I think it was 9, or maybe it was his little brother who was called the Pocket Rocket, Henri Richard. One of them won 9 titles or something. We have Mr. Hockey, Gordie Howe, no relation, but that's showing all of the stitches he's had in his long and storied career. He was certainly one of the best players. He played until he was 46, essentially my age, and was played without a helmet when most people were still wearing helmets, or had started wearing helmets. And you could see, what the lack of a helmet did for him. And notice he's kind of a fairly young man at this point. This is, he still has 10, 15 years of his career left. Probably the greatest goalie of all time, if not the greatest, certainly, that never essentially got to play in the NBA, which was Vladislav Tretiak. He was just absolutely dominant in international competition. Almost couldn't be scored upon. And the worst thing the Soviets did in 1980 was they pulled him from goal after the first period. Of course, he was Russian, and so he couldn't really play in the NHL. Although he eventually became a consultant, and now as a front, I think he works with the Chicago Blackhawks and has been a great general manager. So he made his mark in the NHL. It just wasn't as a goalie, but. Probably the best goalie to ever play the game, and then the greatest. In fact, they call him the Great One, and he's right up there with Michael Jordan and Tom Brady and Jerry Rice and some of the other greats. And that's Wayne Gretzky, who won 4 out of 5 years in Edmonton, and then had a very bizarre press conference where he pretended to cry. That's my interpretation. And then came to married a Hollywood starlet. And moved to LA and became an LA King. I never saw him play, unfortunately. My parents got to see him play towards the end of his career. Let me just show you a few of his highlights. I'm going to mute it because the music is so annoying. But you just get to see his artistry and his grace, and apparently a raccoon. I mean, he could score from way out. He could, just kind of do that type of thing. Just kind of weave his way through other people, and he never panicked. He never rushed. That was the thing, is everyone else was, he was just so fluid and didn't hurry his shot and kind of allowed things to develop and could kind of see people out of the corner of his eyes. Almost like a great point guard, really. I mean, he sort of almost was a point guard, and this is going to show a lot of him scoring, but he also was great at passing the puck as well. And he scored points. He could kind of put the puck wherever he wanted to. I mean, he got it right in the corner there, right in the corner. Just was sort of graceful, fast, smart. There was a great pass he just made right there. Just scored, just blew away the scoring records. I think I probably could have found a better video. Some of the best footage I've ever seen is him just dribbling around people, until he sees an opening and then just going for it. He just kind of saw where people were, almost like an NFL quarterback that throws the ball when the guy's not even 15 yards from where, he just anticipates exactly what's going to be where, always just one step ahead of everybody else. That was Wayne Gretzky. He blew away all the records. There's no one even remotely close to him today. I don't think he'll ever be caught. And part of it is rule changes, but part of it is, he was had that unique talent that you only see once every 50 or 100 years in a sport, and that was Wayne Gretzky. I mean, scoring when he has his back to the goal. Okay, you got the idea. That's Wayne Gretzky, Canadian superstar and best hockey player of all time.